Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to talk about another trope. Let's talk about the fish out of water trope. So as always, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and let's begin. So the fish out of water trope. It's one of the classic tropes, and as I said before, I want to talk a little bit more about different tropes and how they can be used to help someone write a book, namely me. So I want to talk a bit about the fish out of water trope. So the fish out of water trope really is just when a character is placed into a situation that they're unfamiliar with and either adapts to the situation or they don't adapt. And that in and of itself is the source of most of the conflict in the story, or at least one of the layers of conflict in the story. This trope is often used as a shorthand way to kind of explain the world building, because it's so much easier to explain your world and the way it works through the character who's learning about it, so that things that are really just exposition dumps don't really feel as much like exposition dumps, because it needs to be explained to the character as well as the reader. So for example, Harry Potter, both the books and the movies, they make use of the fish out of water trope. Harry grew up in a completely human muggle world, and then at 11 gets thrust into the magical world. He knows nothing about magic, how it works, any of the rules of the world, or anything like that. So as he learns, we as the audience also learns. Same thing with the dark lore and all that stuff. Whatever he learns, we're learning. So it's not repetitive or redundant information that people are spewing, because it's much needed exposition. But it's also just the easy way for the writer to say, this works like this works like that works like this, that kind of thing. Another great example is Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson series. Similar situation, mostly because Rick Riordan modeled the Percy Jackson series after Harry Potter. So Percy Jackson lives in a completely normal human life and goes to boarding school and all this stuff. His most difficult things he deals with is having ADHD and dyslexia, which in his life is actually really difficult because he's not in classes that help nurture anything like that. But when he finds out he's a demigod, he ends up getting thrust into this world with all these monsters and magic and ancient gods and all these rules, and he can't use technology because monsters gonna come after him and all this stuff. So we learn about all this stuff about Camp Half-Blood and everything about how the ancient gods work in the modern world and all this kind of stuff. We learn it all through him. So that's another great use of the fish out of water trope, and he definitely does adapt. Same with Harry. They both end up adapting to their situation because they also fall into another trope, the chosen one trope, which will have its own video, and we will talk about that good little boy later on. So yeah, make sure you subscribe to catch that video. And of course, another great example is one of my favorite book series ever, the Stormlight Archive. So this one's a little different. This is where you kind of get into the basics of the trope, but you kind of change it a little bit. You change it up a little bit to make it your own. This is how you make these kind of basic, repetitive things more original and feel more unique. So Kaladin, while he is familiar with the world he lives in, with Roshar and the wars and things that are going on, because he himself has been a soldier and has been participating in wars and stuff, so he understands the world and the setting and the place and stuff where he is. But when he gets enslaved and becomes a bridgeman and has to join a bridge crew, he's completely unfamiliar with that, because he hasn't been a slave before, he hasn't been in a position like that, and in a situation where he's almost guaranteed death every day, multiple times a day. So he has to completely adjust to that, and he tries to pull in his soldier stuff to kind of try to help him mentally adapt to it and all this kind of stuff. So it's a fish out of water trope, but it's one that has a bit of a slant to it. It's changed up a little bit and made a little bit more unique and prettied up a bit, I guess I'll say. So it's still used really well, and it allows Brandon to basically give us all this information about the world of Roshar and all this stuff that's going on, mostly, but not in the same way that the other two examples I gave do. Not through just big exposition dumps to the character. They're more contextual exposition dumps. They're all relative to things that we know with a little context. So Stormlight is a good example of using the trope in such a way that make it unique and make it feel like something different, not the same, same old, same old. Another example of a fish out of water trope, it can be seen in pretty much any superhero based story. So similar way, someone grows up human, totally normal, blah, 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 gets special powers and ends up having to basically learn how to use those powers. When the fish out of water trope is basically used in those instances, most often in comic book properties, it's more so about learning the powers and learning the structure of what that person can do and learning their limitations, more so than understanding the world. But oftentimes it does jump into what I consider phase 2 of fish out of water, where the new superhero will like learn their powers and have their, their junk costume and stuff, their, ski mask costume and all that stuff, and then properly get introduced to the world of superheroes. I guess one of the decent examples would be like Spider-Man movie, and then Spider-Man ends up in Captain America Civil War, if those movies had done it differently. It's like Peter Parker learns Spider-Man stuff, blah, 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 then get introduced to the wider world with all these other heroes and stuff. So using the fish out of water trope isn't necessarily a bad thing. I know just, saying, oh, that's just a trope, trope, like kind of has almost a negative connotation to it. But I think a lot of readers, and especially a lot of writers, know that tropes are not a bad thing. Tropes are shorthand. The use of the fish out of water trope is a good way to get exposition across, especially really complicated, detailed exposition, and worlds where there's basically paragraphs of information that there's no other way to even explain it without an exposition dump. And I can even come up with another example, much similar to the first two, is the Lightbringer series. Kip. Well, it's also a little different, but it's closer to the first two. Kip, the main character in the Lightbringer saga, he is familiar with drafting and all this kind of stuff, and like the world that he lives in. But after he is made an orphan and has to go live with his dad in the big city, basically, he kind of gets thrust into the situation with drafters and rich people and people whose names mean a whole lot and just like all this other kind of stuff. So we learn all about that world through his perspective and through his eyes, and also through other characters' eyes. So if you have a story that you're writing and you have a crap ton of exposition to get out, then I would suggest use a fish out of water trope, but change it up in a really interesting way to make it not feel like a very obvious trope, but use it in such a way that obviously, hopefully, will draw in your readers. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this video. So let me know, what do you think about the fish out of water trope? What are some good examples you can think of where the fish out of water trope is applied? Let me know about that in the comments down below. And make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And I will talk to you all next time. Peace.